Well, good morning. It's still morning here. Good morning, everyone. It's afternoon for Cynthia. Good afternoon, Cynthia. She joins us from the East Coast today, and we were just talking about time zones a little bit. And that panic moment you get when you don't remember what time zone you're working in. I totally get it. Cynthia is actually someone that Becky has had some experience working with and attended some of her sessions. So I'm gonna let Becky talk a little bit about Cynthia, and then I'm gonna let Cynthia do a full intro.
I actually saw this session when I was at the Pro Literacy Conference this past fall and thought it was great. And when Kim said we were going to do this winter conference and were there any presenters that I thought would be good to bring in, I immediately thought of this session because digital resiliency is so important, not just for our students, but for all of us. And numeracy is always on our minds with GED instruction and with our English language learners who also need to build those numeracy skills. So I thought she would be a great fit. And I pitched this morning to one of my coworkers and told her this will be the perfect session right before lunch because Cynthia is a very high energy and she will involve us and keep us going. So
How'd you know, Becky? No, just kidding. Good afternoon. Good morning slash afternoon, whatever time zone you may or may not be in. My name is Cynthia Bell, as Becky and Kim just said. And I'll share my screen in case you're a visual person like myself. I work for the Literacy Assistance Center. We are a professional development organization based out of New York City. And I do trainings and workshops and teacher coaching with GED, HSC instructors, ABE instructors. So I've been doing this for about 10 years. I love what I do. And I don't know if any of you all saw, but the PIAC results came out over the winter break. And PIAC is the international test that they do where they assess different countries. And there were some not startling because, it's kind of expected, but surprising numbers as far as the number of Americans that they assessed that have low numeracy skills. It was over 70 million people are at level 1 in numeracy. That hurt my soul to see, but at the same time, I was like, see, this is why I do what I do. Numeracy is so important. The literacy numbers were low as well, but the numeracy numbers were higher. There were more Americans with low numeracy skills than literacy skills. They also had the numbers around digital literacy. Those numbers were quite low as well. So that just lit a fire under me again, right before the new year. I'm like, this work that we do is so important. Numeracy and digital literacy and digital resiliency and literacy. So thank you for all the work that you all are doing. We're all making a difference in some way that we're doing it. So this session is building numeracy with digital resiliency, developing skills in the digital age. So we're going to talk specifically about numeracy, but we're also going to talk about what digital resiliency is. I do have two disclaimers. One, this session was designed to be in person. I have delivered it remotely, but I will just say it's much better in person, right? Because our first activity we do is a four corners activity where everybody's moving around the room. So, if you want to get up and move around your room, feel free to do so, but this is remote, so we're going to have to do it digitally. And the second disclaimer is I'm going to share an anecdote that may have higher level math, but it's not for you to focus on the math content, but rather what's happening in the story, right? So I don't want anybody to go, oh no, and then freak out and leave the meeting, right? So just give you that disclaimer there. All right. So here's our objectives for us. We're going to define digital resiliency to make sure we're all talking about the same thing and understand the key components. We're going to discuss and identify habits of mind that all of us and our adult learners definitely want to try and make sure we have and develop and grow, and strategies for developing it. So I'm not going to just talk about abstract things because no teacher likes that, right? We always want to know what can I take and try tomorrow or give a student for them to try. So those are objectives for us to accomplish in the next 75 minutes, 80 minutes or so. So here's our warm up. Here's that We're going to play 4 corners, right? Digitally. I'm going to use a tool, maybe you're familiar with it, called Mentimeter. That's going to just help us to do interact more with each other. So you can scan the QR code if you'd prefer to use your device. I typically use my phone just because it makes it easier. However, if you want to click on the link that I'm going to drop in the chat box for you, you can do that as well. And we will do our 4-corner activity. I just got to get to the chat box. Zoom won't let me be great sometimes. Okay, there it is. Chat box. So I'm going to drop the link in the chat box for you, so you can click on the link or you can scan the QR code. And we're going to just do 4 corners. We're going to identify ourselves with 4 corners, and then let you all answer. Oh, nope. I was going through the slides at the beginning and now I'm all the way at the beginning. So don't answer that slide. That is, don't answer that slide. I was reviewing them at the beginning. Let's try this again. Slide 1, there you go. So you might need to refresh your screen, but I see some of you are already answering. So how do you see yourself? Do you see yourself as someone who enjoys math, someone who tolerates math, someone who has to do math, or someone who runs for math, right? Give yourself a chance to identify how you identify yourself. I love asking this question when I work with instructors. For 2 years, I ran a course at the LAC that was for people to get certified in Common Core instruction. And I had to run the unit on math. And I would have people come up to me all the time and say, I just want you to know that I'm not a math person. So be nice to me, right? Like it was like before we even did anything, before I even said hello, they would like slip me notes or come talk to me at the front of the room, right? So like, how do you identify yourself? And I was like, thank you for letting me know, but this is a safe place, okay, right? Like, so how do you identify as someone who enjoys math, someone who tolerates math, someone who has to do math? So I'm gonna pause. This is the part where, if we were in person, you'd turn and talk to someone in your corner and be like, hey, why are you here? So now if you'd like to unmute yourself and tell us why you selected what you selected, please feel free to do that. Let's pull someone from someone who enjoys math. Could you tell us why you identify as someone who enjoys math? I'm really good at wait time, by the way. Go ahead, Jeanette.
I just like that there's a concrete answer.
Okay. You like concreteness, right? Like you feel like there's a definitive answer and I will find it, and that makes you feel comfortable.
Yeah, and you can, check your answer and yeah.
Gotcha. Does anybody else from that corner want to tell us why they enjoy math?
Sure. I enjoy math, and I'm in that corner, but I didn't always enjoy math. I did not grow up enjoying math, and it wasn't until well into my college years that I learned to enjoy it. But the thing that I enjoy about it is that it's a challenge for me, and I see it as kind of like a puzzle solving type situation, and it's very, very satisfying to find the answer, but also to identify different steps to arrive at that answer.
Gotcha. Okay. Thank you for sharing. Anybody else? We only have one person, right? And if we were in person and I saw you standing in that corner, I'd come over there and talk to you, right? So if you'd like to, someone who has to do math, if you'd like to, I don't want to out you if you don't want to, but if you'd like to tell us why you have placed yourself in that corner as someone who has to do math.
That was me. I was oscillating between this one or someone who tolerates math. I've also grown in my acceptance of math. I was kind of like Jeremy. When I was a kid, no way. I didn't like the way it was taught. I didn't understand it. It was frustrating. I still have nightmares of my dad yelling times tables at me. And I've grown to accept it. I occasionally do some numeracy math things, and it is a struggle to teach it. I'm an ESL teacher, so I incorporate numeracy, but just sometimes explaining that, it's tricky. So I do it, I would like to learn to enjoy it more, and I would like to learn to explain it better to my students. And to do that, I need to understand it better myself.
Gotcha. Understanding is key. Thank you for sharing that. I did the math real quickly and I noticed, right? Math. I'm not even talking about the computation. I did the math. I noticed and I wondered. I noticed that there are only 8 responses, but there are way more than 8 people, right? So if we were in person, you would have had to pick a corner. Go ahead. I see you
Yeah,
unmuted yourself.
I actually put someone who tolerates math, but it
Mhm.
didn't show up.
Ah, okay.
Cynthia,
You want to tell us why you're someone who
So
tolerates
there's
math?
9 people then.
my
Well, I'm kind of like Kate, but um, I know it's part of everyday life. You know, you have to do it, and I can do basic math, and I'm surprised how many people can't do basic math. But as soon as you start throwing in the letters and like, why is A this and B this? It's, then it loses me. I remember in school we had to do those dumb story problems, like, the people with the different colored hats. And I was always just, well, just everybody take their hat off and sit where you want, very easy.
Thank
But
you for sharing.
yeah, so
Go ahead.
that's why I
I'm
put
one of
myself in
them.
tolerating.
Okay, thank you. Go ahead.
I'm one of them that runs from math. It doesn't show up on your screen, but on mine, when I clicked on my other screen, there are a lot more people. I don't know if you need to refresh.
That's what I was
on
thinking.
the
Maybe I
one
should
you
refresh
have.
the page. Go ahead.
But it's because when I was younger, the math teacher I had when I was younger uh would not work with the ones that didn't understand. There was they don't wait for you to understand, and then she actually used the ones that didn't understand and did it wrong as an example of how not to use it, how not to do the math problem. That's how bad it was. So I think it just followed me through college and up, and it just
So
I think
Jen,
that's what happens with a lot of students too that come in with math. They had bad experiences when they were younger and didn't have anyone patient enough to help.
so Jennifer, the good thing about having that bad teacher is you know exactly what you don't ever want to be.
Exactly.
Right. But you got to get past that.
Yes.
Okay, math is not as bad, and yeah, it's hard. Yeah.
Good for you.
I appreciate Kate's comment. That's how I feel too, right? This is why I'm smiling, because every time I've done this activity, this particular, and this is our warm-up, can turn into a math therapy session real fast, right? And that's okay. Like I've actually taken courses on math therapy. That is a real thing, trauma-informed instruction and things like that, because sometimes, unfortunately, educators can do a lot of harm, right? That's actually one of my first teaching philosophies is do no harm, right? Because there's so many people that just have experienced trauma in their classrooms, and that begets math anxiety, which is a real thing, by the way. That is not like a figment of our imagination or something I could just think away. It actually produces a biological response of fight or flight in someone when they're experiencing math anxiety. Which is why our brain physically starts to shut down because you are in a fight or flight mode. So that is a real thing. However, right, this was our warm-up, so I'm going to move us there because here's the next question, right? I wanted you to just take note of where you were, where our 4 corners are, because the next question is, how do you see yourself when it comes to technology? Do you see yourself as someone who, that's supposed to say technology on the side, right? Oh, the right is showing you the segmentation so we can see the crossover. Do you see yourself as someone who enjoys technology, someone who tolerates technology, someone has to use technology, or someone who runs technology? This is why I like the segmenting tool, so we can start to see like if there's any crossover or overlap, or are there like divergences here? So how do you identify yourself around technology? So while you all are shifting, this is what I will say. The first good 7, 8 years that I taught and that I started doing professional development, as I said, I would get those teachers that would come to me and say, just so you know, I would hear I'm not a math person all the time. But around 2019, so right before COVID, around 2019, that's when things started to shift. And then after COVID, when all of us had to start teaching online, All I heard was, I'm not a technology person. I'm not a tech person. In fact, I hear that now more than I hear I'm not a math person. So I want to know, how do you identify when it comes to technology? I love that we don't have anybody in the corner that says someone who runs from technology, or do I need to refresh my page? Let's see. Would someone like to share why they selected someone who enjoys using technology?
Ronaldo.
Hi.
I say something to my class, it's like the sky is blue, and they look at me like I'm from Mars. So they'll play a video, like a math video, and he says the sky is blue, and then I go, oh! I was like, I really
So you like it for that purpose, right? Like that it helps as a teaching technique, as a teaching tool, as a validation. Thank you for sharing that. Let's hear one more person from someone who enjoys technology. Maybe you can convince the rest of us who are not in that corner.
So a big part of my job is dealing with data, and I like having the questions and being able to find the answers. And technology helps me find those answers much more quickly and readily than if I did not have technology. And y'all, when I started doing the NRS tables, you calculated by hand.
I heard
Yeah.
about that back in the
Yeah.
day. Someone
Yep.
said, someone's like, here, look at all these tables. I had to do it by hand.
So yes, it's a great tool to use, and it can help you find the answers and information you need much more quickly.
Gotcha. I'm noticing that your answer around technology is similar to Jeremy's answer with math. Did anybody else catch that? All right, let's hear from someone who tolerates technology.
I am in the learning process. You can ask him. I am working baby steps. You can teach an old dog new tricks, but sometimes you got to just shake them once in a while and say, what did I tell you? So it is, yes, using technology is a learning experience.
So it sounds like you have a growth mindset about technology. Okay. Thank you for sharing. Can I hear from someone I'm just someone who has to use technology? I love hearing from this group.
This is me again. So it's actually, again, I'm having so many flashbacks today. This is not dissimilar to my feelings about math, or yes, my feelings about math. As a kid, hated it. I grew up in a family of Luddites. Pandemic hits and I had to become a tech person. And I will say I definitely have now adapted a growth mindset to it. I am not scared to use technology in my classroom, whereas before the pandemic, it would have been a whole thing. So in one way, I'm grateful to the pandemic for that. That was one silver lining of a bad situation. I'm not going to ever be someone who is just like embracing technology or, yeah, let's do it and gung ho and likes it. But I do use it and I do appreciate its benefits. I respect it, maybe, if I don't enjoy it.
A solid respect for technology and math out of Kate here. So one, thank you all for engaging me in the warm up. And two, I hope it already started like making your mind find some things about where we might be going. You probably have already even noticed it. There are a lot of similarities about how we think and approach and work with technology and math, right? Which is why I'm a big fan. This is what the session is. Like, I can use math to build digital resiliency. I can do both of these things at the same time because the thinking and the skills and the habits of mind are pretty much the same. And the way people sometimes even identify themselves. I always find it fascinating when I do the math part and I have like someone who immediately runs to the I love math corner. And then when I put the technology part in there, they immediately go to the opposite end of the room. And I'm like, that's interesting. Right? Like the thinking that's needed in math is the same thinking that's needed around technology. So we're gonna move past our warm up and move on to our next thought here around digital resiliency. So as I said, I'm going to share a little bit of an anecdote because, oh, and also feel free to, I like to model things. Four Corners is a really good activity to use as a classroom if you're not doing it already, right? One, getting people up and moving helps with learning. And two, there's lots of habits of mind that can happen. And I even also modeled a little bit another instructional routine called Notice and Wonder. Hopefully you use that as well, right? I noticed that, therefore I wonder. That is mathematical thinking, by the way. You do not have to do computations and calculations to do math. Mathematical thinking happens quite often, and that's going to be one of our strategies we'll share in a minute. Okay, so one day while helping my daughter, this is my daughter, her name is Leanne. I call her Ladybug. Um, she's sitting in the Supreme Court justice's seat of the state of Florida. They went on a field trip to the state Supreme Court, and she got to sit in the justice's seat. And she went and sat there, and I was like, "Ooh, is that a goal?" She's like, "Nah, I want to be in law enforcement." I'm like, "Okay," right? So this is my daughter Leanne, and currently, right now, she's taking geometry honors, and she's in 8th grade. But last year she was taking Algebra 1 honors in 7th grade, and she was doing pretty good, but she had one of those math teachers that some of you all just described, like here's the steps, here's the things, do the things, take the notes, write the stuff, get the answers, right? Like that was, his name was Mr. Walensky, right? And she would always just do things the exact way Mr. Walensky wanted it. Whether I tried to help her learn how to think about what made sense, it was like, nope, that's not how Mr. Walensky wants it done. Right. So one day she was doing Mr. Walensky's homework. And I had a long day myself at work. And then I had tutored, because I also tutor because I miss teaching. I had tutored that day. And then after tutoring, I went to Bible class at my church. I take a ministry school class. So I came home and it was around like 10 o'clock at night. I am like completely wiped out cognitively and physically. And she's sitting at the kitchen table and she goes, "Mom, can you help me with my homework?" And I'm like, just like, okay, cool. So, right, I boxed out the problems because again, remember I said I didn't want to freak anybody out with high level math, right? Because this is a quadratic problem, which I'm aware is not on the GED, right? But the anecdote of where we're going is what matters, right? So she's working on this problem. She tried doing it. She couldn't figure it out. So I'm like, fine. I sat down next to her. I'm like, give me a second. Let me read the problem. I'm reading the problem. As you can see, she's already underlined the question. I understand that I got to figure out how long does it take for the ball to descend to the ground, etc. So I'm able to reason my way and I help her answer the first question by reasoning like that the maximum height on the parabola is like the highest amount that the ball can go in the air. That was cool. Then I tackled the second question by thinking about the coordinates of the vertex and how that relates to like the time, right? So I figured that out. But the third question, because the first question is what is the maximum height of the ball? The second question was how long does it take for the ball to reach the maximum height? But this third question, how long does it take for the ball to descend to 3 feet above the ground? I could not figure it out. I could not figure it out. I could not figure it out. And I had hit my cognitive wall. At that point, I had no brain power left. I was so tired, right? So what did I do? I went into problem solving mode. Besides problem solving in math, I went into just human being problem solving mode. What did I use to help me solve this problem? I'm pretty sure you can guess it. I went to technology. I went to technology. I could not figure out the math behind it. And I tried all my bags of tricks mathematically. I tried factoring the trinomial. I tried finding the zeros. Like I tried all of the math problem solving stuff. And then I was like, bump this. I don't have time for that anymore. I went to Desmos, which is one of my favorite teaching tools. If you are a math teacher, teaching HSC, Desmos is one of those great tools that's out there. I use it for a lot of different activities in math, but it does have a graphing tool. So I went to Desmos. I just went straight to Desmos and I put in that function and I graphed it. And then I said, okay, well, let's figure out where it meets. Like, what's this point right here? Because this point right here is the answer to the question. but we could not land on the exact number. I tried zooming in and zooming in and zooming in, and I could never get to like the exact point. Even from the picture, you can see it. You can't really clearly see exactly where that green line crosses over that like gray line. So eventually I was just like, okay, this is the best we can do. Let's just say it's approximately 1.3583. And she's like, what? I was like, write it down in the notebook. Let's go to bed. Okay. So she wrote it down. She went to school the next day. And then she came back home and she goes, Mom, I was the only one who got that problem right. And I'm like, winning. Right. And then she says, but Mr. Walensky realized that he hadn't actually taught us yet how to solve those problems. And so he threw it out and it didn't matter. And I was like, what? Okay, like we already talked about the bad math teachers that are out there, but not saying that Mr. Winsky is a bad math teacher. Let's just say it wasn't one of his finer moments, right? To give students homework that was then going to have them up till 11 o'clock at night, trying to solve a problem that he had not actually taught them how to do yet. Okay, so that's the story. That's the situation, right? You all are going to actually problem solve and analyze my story, right? Don't forget the factors. I was exhausted. I was tired. So we're going to go back to the Mentimeter. I will drop the link one more time in case you closed it, or if you'd like to scan the QR code, you could do that. You're going to go back to the Mentimeter and we're going to answer this question. This question here. What are some things, right? We said math is noticing and wondering. What are some things that you noticed in my story? And nothing that you noticed is irrelevant. Anything that you noticed. It could have even been, I noticed that you called your daughter Ladybug, right? Whatever it is that you noticed. What are some things that you noticed in my story? I noticed that there were 3 questions that you had to answer. Just tell me whatever it is that you noticed. I am actually going to do it as well. I always do work that I ask people to do. Oh, I love that. Like almost all of you said you noticed my frustration. Thank you for feeling my pain. There's the link again in case you needed it. Oh, I didn't mean to open it there. I meant to open it here so I can participate. Love all the answers that we're getting. I noticed you tried multiple ways to solve the problem. You weren't afraid to share that you didn't know how to do the problem. Overwhelmed. Your brain had hit a wall, that's for sure. Your daughter knew where to go for help. Oh, that's one of my favorite things to say to my students, that smart people know where to go to get information or help. It's okay to not know how to do something, but what's not okay is to sit there in that not knowing, right? Like figure it out. That is problem solving. Teacher Mr. L is old school. That is a truer statement was never said today. Okay, you didn't give up, you used your resources. Okay, great. So here's my next question for you. What are some things that you wondered about in my story? And again, nothing is irrelevant because that is how we as human beings operate. We notice things and then we wonder. I noticed that you were tired, Cynthia. I wonder if you went to bed after helping your daughter. I wonder, did you eat dinner that day, Cynthia? Whatever you were wondering, tell me what you wonder. I wonder how you got approximately 1.3583, whatever your wondering question is. Why didn't I just not do the problem? But that is such a good question. I'm writing this answer for me. I wrote, I wonder why Leanne didn't just ask her father for help. Instead, she waited for me to walk through the door. Because that was the first question I asked her was, why didn't you just ask your dad? And she just gave me that look like, you know why I didn't ask dad? Okay. I wonder, are you regularly helping your daughter with math? My older one, yes, my older one is in algebra 2, and she's one of those students who struggles a little bit with math. My younger one, she doesn't really like it when I help her because I always ask her to think about things and she wants to just be told what the steps are. So she doesn't really like it when I ask her to help. What the teacher thought when she got the correct answer. I wish I could have seen the teacher's face too. I wonder if she stayed up late to keep trying herself without giving up. No, eventually she finished the rest of her homework and went to bed. I wonder what made you decide to go to the internet for assistance. There it is, right? Like that's the crux to this, right? I looked for problem solving. I was trying to figure it out. Thank you all for sharing and engaging in our notice and wondering here for a second. I wonder, what did you think when you saw how the teacher taught the students how to do the problem? I did not like how the teacher was teaching them because she couldn't reason her way through what made sense. Math should make sense. That's hard. That's part of the problem why people struggle with it, because they feel like it doesn't make sense. But math can and does make sense. So I even modeled for her like the ball throwing in the air. That's what a parabola is. When you throw the ball in the air, it goes up and then it comes back down. So the question asking what's the maximum height is asking what's the top of that parabola? What's the vertex of that parabola, right? Like you should be able to reason your way and think about what makes sense. You throw the ball in the air, it goes to a certain height and then it comes back down. That's basic gravity. You might not have the vocabulary for describing it as vertex and parabola, but you still understand the concept of what goes up must come down. So it does make sense. So eventually she got the answer, but it didn't matter, right? Because Mr. Walensky threw out the question. So thank you all for engaging that. So let's talk about what digital resiliency is, right? Because the reason somebody asked, why did I use Desmos? Because of digital resiliency, right? I had exhausted all of my other problem-solving skills, right? I tried all of the other math problem-solving skills that I could, but then I realized that I am a problem solver, and problem solving is more than answering word problems. I, Cynthia Bell, am a problem solving. Something is wrong, I have to figure it out. And one of the tools that I could use is technology. The definition of digital resiliency is the awareness, skills, agility, and confidence to be empowered users of new technologies and adapt to changing digital skill demands. That is the definition. So if you ever hear the term digital resiliency and you're like not quite sure what that means, this is what digital resiliency means. So I'm going to ask us to process this a little bit. We were going to process this on Mentimeter, but in case you're feeling a little fatigued with the technology, I'm going to ask you to share if you'd like to share with your voice, or if you'd like to share in the chat box, you can. So the question I'm going to ask you is like, what word out of this definition resonates with you the most? What word resonates with you the most? If you want to unmute yourself and answer and tell me why, you can, or you can drop it in the chat box. Confidence, confidence.
I always say awareness, because if you aren't even aware it can do something, you don't know how to ask it to do it.
True, right? Like even in my story, right? You might have been one of those people who were like, I didn't even know Desmos was a thing. So I wouldn't even have known to go to Desmos. Good for you, Cynthia, that you knew to go to Desmos, right? So good point. Changing, agility, adapt, empowered, confidence is a lot. Anybody else? Every time I see this definition, a different word stands out to me. Today, what's standing out to me is new technologies. Because we live in the 25th year of the 21st century, and technology is constantly changing. Constantly changing. Where that thing was on Outlook last week is not where that thing is on Outlook this week. And now I'm like, how do I find that? I have to tap into my digital resiliency to find it. Otherwise, I'm going to just sit there and be like, well, I don't know how to attach this file to this email anymore. Oh, well, right? Like you have to have some digital resiliency. Maybe your digital resiliency in that situation is to get up and go ask your colleague. That's fine. Or maybe your digital resiliency is to Google it. Or maybe your digital resiliency is to go to Chat GPT and ask it, right? Like there's different levels, but you are still trying to adapt to that new technology. Anybody else want to share their thought on what word is resonating with you and our definition of what is digital resiliency?
You know, I typed a different word. I typed empowered, but the longer I look at it, I keep landing on demands because it is a demand. You cannot be without digital resiliency skills in this day and age. You know, I shared at the beginning, I was on the phone with my mom who didn't know how to make her tablet screen brighter. She's visually impaired. It's important that her screen is as bright as it can be. She knew where to go for an answer, right? And then she said, I'm not sure I can see on this good enough to do it. I might have to wait till you can come and help me. Which is fair, but you know, she knew where to go. And it's a demand of her day, even though she's retired. She wants her tablet, she needs to do stuff on it.
Good point. And think about your learners, think about your students, whomever they are. As you said, technology is there, it's present. Like banking, I need to be able to access my health records, right? Like doctor's appointments or sending my test results via their portals and all those other things, right? Like if I can't figure it out, those create some huge barriers for me as an adult living in our society. So more so than digital skills, I'm all for teaching digital skills. I love teaching digital skills, but at this point for me, I put way more focus on helping to build people's digital resiliency because those skills are constantly changing. 1 month you're teaching them the skills of copying, pasting, and next month how you copy and paste is completely different, right? Like I need to have some kind of digital resiliency because technology is just constantly changing. And that confidence word that a lot of you all said, that is a little bit of that key. Think back to the beginning when I asked, how do you identify? I don't think that I am awesome at technology, but I definitely feel confident enough to figure it out, right? That is digital resiliency. And that same like confidence, I feel the same way about math. I could not solve that problem off the top of my head, but I'm like, nah, I'm gonna sit down because I'm about to figure this out, right? Like that's that habit of mind that we're talking about. There are some habits of mind that are just too interchangeable between math and numeracy and digital resiliency. So I'm going to share with you some key components of digital resiliency. And here they are. Oh, someone just listed retirement, Social Security, Medicare, insurance, doctors, all of those things, right, are going to require some digital resiliency. So here are key components of digital resiliency: problem solving, adaptability, critical thinking, communication and sharing information, and productive struggle. What do you all think about our key components? These are the key components that make up digital resiliency. Any thoughts that you have about these? Maybe you're already even noticing some patterns or connections to some things that have to do with math or not. But any thoughts you want to share about these 5 key components that make up digital resiliency? Karen said adulting. Basically, you're like, that's what adulting is. Good point. Anything else you all want to share?
Well, I think all 5 apply to, my experience because I'm almost 52 years old. And so the only technology classes I had before college were in middle school. And we were using like the Apple IIe and the Commodore computers with the actual floppies that actually flopped. And so by the time I was in college, I still remember the day that I was introduced to email because my teacher said, you have to email me every Thursday. And I didn't know what email was. And I never actually had a class that taught me these things.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's the thing with technology. A lot of these things, even if you do have a class, it's not going to be sufficient because, like you said, it's always going to change. How you do things is always going to change. And so that all of these things, I think, are so important for learning technology.
Thank you, Sharon. And I agree. Which is why, this is what I hope that you all get out of this, whether you teach ABE, ESL, GED, right? I mean, the main idea here is that you can teach both of these things at the same time. But even if that's not what you take away, I hope the biggest thing that you take away is thinking about how important digital resiliency is and how you're going to help the people in your lives develop it, as well as yourself, right? I am a big fan of this philosophy that they say on the airplanes. In case of an emergency, secure your mask first before helping others. How am I going to help someone develop digital resiliency when myself, I just told someone 5 minutes ago, I'm not a tech person. Right? But then I'm going to walk into the classroom and be like, okay, class, let's learn some digital resiliency. But I just said that I'm not a tech person myself. So I also hope that you start to think about how you can develop your digital resiliency. Again, remember, I'm going to give you some specific strategies afterwards, but this is all it is. Problem solving, adaptability, critical thinking, communication and sharing information, and productive struggle. And productive struggle is a key part of learning. It's a key part of learning. So let's just see, let's find that clear crossover. Let's be concrete about it. What is numeracy? Here's the definition of numeracy. It is our ability to access, use, interpret, I love all these verbs, and communicate mathematical information ideas in order to engage in and manage mathematical demands of a range of situations in adult life. This is why I pursue the idea of doing both of these. Yes, I am a math teacher, a math coach, a math subject matter expert, a math tutor, all of those things. But I don't believe in developing these skill sets in silos because they are too interconnected and related. They are habits of mind that share. And here are numeracy habits in mind. And you might notice they look a lot like our 5 key components of digital resiliency. These are some habits of mind of math and numeracy. Make sense of problems and persevere in solving them. My daughter had a math problem that was really hard. I could have just said, yeah, no, mom's really tired today. I'm not going to help you. Good luck with that and go to bed. And she would have maybe sat there for another 20 minutes and attempted to make sense of the problem and persevere in solving it. Right? But I needed to flex my habit of mind, make sense of problems and persevere in solving it. The next one, use tools strategically and appropriately. What did I do? I said, I can't figure this out. So I went and found a tool strategically and appropriately. Here's a little side note here. If you have students who count using their fingers, encourage them to use their fingers. That is not a bad thing. There's like the stigma behind counting with your fingers. That means you're dumb or you can't do math. No, as far as I'm concerned, that means you're great at math because you use tools strategically and appropriately. I myself still use my fingers to count time. For some reason, I cannot count time without being like 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock. Does that mean I'm not a math person? No, that means I use tools strategically and appropriately. Your fingers are tools. Paper and pencil is a tool. The calculator is a tool. Mental math is a tool. Having tools in your toolbox and knowing when and how to use them is a huge mathematical habit of mine. I saw a lot of thumbs up in there. Does anybody have anything they want to add? Or maybe I just gave you something to think about and you're going, huh. Anytime I have a student say to me, oh, I'm sorry, I have to count on my fingers, I go, good for you. I think too many students are afraid to be wrong, but making conjectures that might sometimes be incorrect are an important part of the learning process. I agree, especially our adult learners, right? Because they've already had these bad experiences and they don't want to be embarrassed in front of their peers. So I praise those. Mistakes is how we learn. Make conjectures. That's just basically fancy talk for guess. I guess, right? And look for and make use of structure. This one is one of my favorite habits of mine. Maybe you're sitting there thinking, I'm not quite sure what that means. So I'll give you an example. Look for and make use of structure. A lot of times when I look for structure, my brain always goes, I noticed that, right? That's me noticing some kind of structure is happening. And now I take that structure and I try to see if it applies somewhere else. Here's like a completely non-mathematical example. I travel a lot for my job, you know, speaking at conferences, right? I would have loved if this conference was in person because then I could have traveled to South Dakota, right? But, so I travel to speak at conferences, and each state has different driving rules. And the main one that gets me is if I can make a right turn on red. So like when I'm leaving the airport in my car rental and I'm sitting there at the corner, I'm just like, can I go? Can I not go? Right. And I wait for somebody to come behind me and honk the horn to tell me that I should go. Right. And that's the structure I look for for someone to tell me to go. But then I started to figure out, because I started to notice that certain towns and cities had the no right turn and others didn't. And I started to notice, therefore I put together the structure. There's actually like a population limit at which they then start to implement the no right on red, because you have more pedestrians crossing the street. So if I'm in the middle of like a low populated area, I just automatically now assume that I can make a right on red unless there is a sign indicating otherwise. But if I'm in a high population downtown traffic area, I automatically assume that I can't make a right on red because there are pedestrians and a lot of them. That would be an example of look for and make use of structure, which now you're probably thinking about it. You probably do that a lot in your everyday life. I'm pretty sure there are students in your classrooms who do that a lot in everyday life. It's just our job to point out to them that that is math. Okay, again, remember back to our 4 corners at the beginning when I was asking you all how you felt. I heard a lot about answer getting, problem solving, and trauma around times tables. If you had been exposed to math is more than that at an earlier age, think about how you would see yourself now. Okay, but that was then. Think about how you can start to see yourself now today and how you can help your learners start to see that. This is what math is. Math is this, these habits of mind. Any thoughts about that? Because I'm going to send us to our break in a minute. I always give you all a break because no one wants to stare at a screen for 90 minutes. So we're going to take a break in a second, but I want to see if anybody has anything that they want to share, because I just did a lot of talking and I don't like that. So I want to hear someone else's voice. Does anybody have any thoughts or connections they want to share about these habits of mind and those components of resiliency?
My go-to answer for people when they ask why they have to learn how to do algebra, geometry, any kind of math that they think they're never going to use again, is that the main thing I learned from doing those kinds of math problems is how to solve any problem. And I think that's exactly what you're talking about with the numeracy habits of mind. Like, how do you approach a problem that you have to solve, whether it's math or a monthly budget, which is still math, or how are we going to cover all the classes that we have with the number of teachers we have, which is still math, anything that you can look at as a problem I have to solve is related to these problem solving skills and these habits of mind.
I completely agree. Or how am I going to pay my electric bill this month? Solve for X, right? Like at the beginning, someone said that, I'm good at math until they start putting the letters. The letters are just showing that there's an unknown. And that's what life is. I don't know everything. There are lots of unknowns. Solve for X. I do not know how I'm going to pay my water bill next month. That is an equation. Solve for X. There is an unknown. I don't have enough money, but my bill is this. You don't have to write the equation out, but you're still thinking about it. You're trying to figure it out. You're trying to figure out what you need to move around. That's what happens when we solve an equation. We move things from one side to the other. You're thinking about, what do I have to move around? If I spend less on my grocery bills this month, I might be able to pay the water, right? Like, these are, someone said it in the chat, adulting, but these are habits of mind that we engage in. So we can help our students to learn these numeracy habits of mind and digital resilience at the same time. So I do just want to point that back out again, that those key components of digital resiliency almost completely look like the math habits of mind. So here's the moral of the story. And then we come back, I'm going to give you the strategies how to do this. Here's the punchline. If you are teaching numeracy habits of mind and skills, you are also teaching digital resiliency. They're not isolated things. Problem solving is a component of digital resiliency. It also happens to be a math habit of mind. Critical thinking. You might even be thinking that that applies to literacy. You're right, it does. Okay. So the real thing here is just like, we have to make it explicit. We can't keep it a secret and secretly know that we're teaching them digital resiliency, but never tell them, right? Like, tell them this is what's happening. Acknowledge it, applaud it, help them to acknowledge it. You are building digital resiliency skills. You are building habits of mind. You are becoming a problem solver, and then let them celebrate it as well. So in the chat, someone said, I do think it is all right to be upfront and tell students that we are learning together at times. There you go. My students think that I have no issues or things I struggle with, so showing them that I'm still learning is all right. I completely agree with you. All righty, it is 12:52. When we come back, I'm going to share with you 3 concrete strategies for how you can help your students develop their habits of mind around numeracy and digital resiliency at the same time. I'll give you 3 concrete examples for how to do that. We're going to take let's see, it's 12:53 or 11:53, if I'm right. You guys are an hour behind. It's 11:53. So please come back at, I was going to say 12:55, but let's make it a nice round, even number. Come back at 12:56. So get your coffee, get your tea. Don't check your email because you're supposed to give your eyes a break, right? Get up and walk, stretch, all those things. I'll see you back at 12. So, wow, 10:53? Okay. So be back at 56 after the hour, whatever the hour is that you're in, okay? Enjoy your break. I hope everybody got some kind of break. I also had to get up. Alrighty then. So we're gonna take this home and give you all some time to definitely reflect and look at these strategies as well. Hopefully you're back. Give me a thumbs up. Just to let me know you're back, especially if you're not on camera. I see some, obviously the people who are on camera, I can see you're here, but just so I can have an idea of how many people are actually still there. That's interesting. I'm not seeing any thumbs ups from all the black screens. There we go. Okay, Crandall is the thumb. Landon's there. There we go. Thank you, Andrew. But I can see that you're there. Oh, we got one in the chat box, an okay emoji. There we go. Okay. Well, we have a quorum. That's what I've learned. That's what it's called in our board meetings. We have a quorum of people, so we can keep going. All right. So here are our strategies for if you're intrigued and you're like, okay, Cynthia, I get it. You've sold your thesis statement to me. So how would I go about doing this? I'm going to share 3 strategies for how you could go about helping to develop and build digital resiliency with numeracy. First strategy. Be strategic and intentional about creating opportunities. It's not going to just magically happen. You have to be strategic about making sure that this happens. And the key word there is opportunities. There need to be learning opportunities. They're there all the time. So here's some things you could think about. Can you provide access to tech tools for learners to use while completing a task or solving a problem? Kind of the same way that you would go about, like if you were doing a math lesson and how you might actually go through the effort and putting manipulatives on the table. You've got your paper, your pencil, your rulers, your manipulatives, your fraction bars. You go through all of that to give them those tools for them to use. provide tech tools too, right? That will give them a chance to use tools strategically and appropriately. That's not necessarily the same as saying you have to use the calculator, right? The strategic part is me being able to recognize that I want to use it. Just like how if you put the manipulatives on the table, you don't say you have to use the ruler. You say, hey guys, there's rulers on the table. If you want to use them, you can. So the same thing around the technology. Give them access to tech tools for them to use in aiding to solve a problem, the same way that you would with other kinds of tools or manipulatives. And then, but be strategic about which ones you're using and why, right? So I actually put together a lesson for, maybe you're familiar, it's called the DRAW project. It came out of World Ed. DRAW means Digital Resiliency in American Workforce. And I put together the lessons for financial literacy for them. And so the concept is working on compound interest. That's a big kind of like formula and idea and concept. But if I wanted to help students think about it, I put it together where they could use an Excel spreadsheet, right? And maybe you're thinking, whoa, Cynthia, Excel spreadsheet, that's a skill unto itself. You're right. But if I say that you have the option to use it, the people who know how to use it or might want to try using it or play around with it, now it's access to them, right? They might not have even thought about doing it. That might be an adult learner in your classroom who's really struggling with that formula, but in their day job, they input data into spreadsheets all day. And they would have never even thought about using the Excel spreadsheet to solve that problem, right? But if I intentionally give them access to it and say, hey, you can use these tech tools to help you solve the problem. So that's one thing you could think about. Another thing you could think about is what math habits of mind will learners need to solve a problem or use a tool. So maybe you're even thinking about like specifically you're having one day where you're specifically working on helping them to learn how to use a tech tool. That's fine. But now if you're doing that, think about what habits of mind are needed to use that tool. Here's a good example that I use whenever I'm about to introduce a new tech tool. I don't just give them the tool, like say our Mentimeter here, right? I wouldn't just be like, okay, here's the tool, go build me a Mentimeter. The first thing I do is do like a notice and wonder. Tell me what are all the things that you notice about this? And I do that because that gives them the opportunity to tap in the habit of mind of look for and make use of structure. Technology has structure. Most of us have recognized that this little arrow here, that means go back. And you click it, look for and make use of structure. Or when you see a plus sign, you know that that means you're about to add something. Or I see this X, that means I'm about to close out something. That is structure. Look for and make use of structure. So a lot of times when I'm about to do a new tool, I stop first. I don't just point everything out, right? Like, hey guys, there's an X there, there's an edit. No, I give them the opportunity to tap into their habit of mind of look for and make use of structure. So I set it up and I say, let's do a notice and wonder. Tell me everything you notice. So that gives them the chance to see the structure. Oh, I see these 3 dots. I know those 3 dots means click and I get more. Oh, I see this eye sign. I know that if I hover over it, it'll tell me what it means. Look for and make use of structure. That is a habit of mind. That's what I'm getting at when I say be strategic about the opportunities. Think about what habits of mind the learners can lean into when you do your problem or when you use your technology tool. And then be intentional about making those habits of mind explicit. Guys, ladies and gentlemen, today we're working on strengthening our look for and make use of structure habit of mind. Today, we're working on strengthening our problem-solving habit of mind. Be explicit about it. And our last question you can think about is what supports can I provide to help learners stay in the productive struggle zone rather than unproductive? There is a thin line between productive and unproductive. Okay, so you want to make sure you are intentional in your planning about thinking about this. Okay, what supports do I need to put in place so that they stay in productive? Here's a good example. If I'm doing a math problem and my learning goal is to help students to maybe I'm solving a multi-step equation, and the equation has decimals instead of whole numbers, right? So maybe it's like 0.5x plus 3, right? So it's a decimal. If my learning goal is to have them to understand the concepts of solving equations, why would I get them hung up on adding and subtracting decimals? That would get them into unproductive struggle, right? So I think about that. What support would I need? I go ahead and say, we're using calculators today because I don't want us to get hung up on adding decimals. We're using calculators today because that's not my learning goal. So thinking about what supports do I need to put in place for my learners so that they stay in the productive struggle zone. Because where I want them to struggle and to have that thinking at is around what's happening when I'm solving an equation, keeping it balanced. What I do to one side, I do to the other, inverse operations, those things. That's where I want their cognitive demand and brain power going, not I forgot how to add and subtract decimals. Any thoughts or questions about our first strategy? Being strategic and intentional about creating opportunities? I'm really okay with the uncomfortable silence, but right then I was thinking, I was like, I wonder if this is going to be hard to edit out for Kim on the recording. Right? Like, I'm okay because wait time is a big thing. Sometimes people need time to think. So I'm going to wait another 10 seconds to see if anybody has any questions or ideas. Maybe something's percolate in your head and you're like, I'm thinking about insert the blank. So I'll wait another 10 to 15 seconds if anybody wants to add anything.
I don't really have anything to add, but I do think that it is something that you need to consider when you're planning in a lesson. You know, what technology that you're going to need to provide and then for what purpose.
For sure. For sure. Thank you for sharing. And to be clear, also, we're not just talking about what technology I, the teacher, am going to use but what technology and tools am I going to give my students access to? And also maybe the technology that I would use as well. So thank you for sharing that. All right. So we're going to go back to being engaged with you all for a second. So let's identify and make connections, right? Let's identify and make connections. So we're going to go back to our Mentimeter. And I am going to have to advance the slide because we skipped over our word cloud, but I'm dropping the link for you one more time in the chat box in case maybe you closed it out when you went on your break. So let's process this together. Which of the habits of mind were used in the opening anecdote? So the whole story about Leanne and her math homework with Mr. Walensky, right? What habits of mind did you see were being employed in that situation, whether by me or by Leanne? And you could say more than one. What habits of mind did you notice? Well, that's the easy one. Make sense of problems and persevere. There was definitely some conjecturing happening for sure. Definitely looking for and make use of structure. Oh, look at that. Are we all noticing how many of those habits of mind were present when just trying to solve one math problem? Use tools strategically and appropriately. For sure, for sure. Because even before I went to Desmos, I was using other tools. I don't know if I said that in the statement, but I had actually drawn out the parabola. We had tried graphing it. We had tried, actually drew the whole scenario because I think the question is like that the person standing on a trampoline. So they are already 3 feet above the ground and they're throwing the ball from the trampoline. I hate questions like that. Can we all just like say that math in general needs to stop with those silly questions? If you want to ask students about parabolas, can we do it in a meaningful way? The same thing with those questions about if a train leaves Chicago at 5 o'clock and another train leaves North Dakota at 7, where do they meet? Like, that's a stupid question. I have an app, I'll use it. right? Like, see, Kate's with me, right? That's what I'm going to use my digital resiliency. But they ask those questions because they want to do systems of equations, but that's not real life. Kim, you just unmuted. I feel like you wanted to get on that soapbox with.
Well, I think you hit it right now when you said real life. I mean, just use real life. If I walk out the door and they're doing estimation and my kid's frustrated because he doesn't want to estimate, I go, I wonder how old this tree is. Let's estimate it. If we were to, and I don't even use the word, yeah, then it makes sense. It's real life. And there isn't an app to do that instantly that second because it's more interesting for them. Even though there
Exactly,
is an
right?
app
Like
to
if
do
it's a
that.
TikTok video that's gone viral, I wonder how many people might watch this today. Like we're estimating, it's about 5 million people saw this today, right? Like, okay. But so you all see it, right? We got make sense of problems, persevere, solving, making conjectures. You're right. There's no wrong answer here. All of these habits of mine were happening in this anecdote. I just wanted to give you a chance to make the connection because that's what we're talking about here. You can do math and build habits of mind at the same time. It just takes intentionality, right? I've decided today I want to focus my students' ability and building that habit of mind of looking for and making use of structure. And it doesn't involve me using a math problem to do it. I just gave that example about the tech tool, doing a notice and wonder about the tech tool. That's looking for and making use of structure. Oh, I noticed this circle down here in the bottom. I wonder what happens when I click it. Oh, that's right. I already know that because I know what thumbs up means. That's you using structure. Technology has structure. That's why everybody loves their iPhones because it's predictable, because you understand the structure. You look for and you make use of it. That is a math habit of mine. I'm hoping by the end of this, if I were to do the how do you identify a thing again at the beginning, I might move some of you more toward the I actually like math, because now that you realize that math is more than just numbers, right? Math is more than just numbers and getting right answers. Next strategy. Next strategy. Encourage your learners to lean into the opportunities in their lives. That's what Kim was kind of just talking about, right? Lean into it, right? Like, here's this issue I'm having in my life, but it takes a certain kind of mental fortitude to lean into it, right? To be like, wait a minute, this is an opportunity for me to build this skill set. And these are some questions you can give your students. How can I use tech tools to help me understand this situation or solve this problem more effectively? That's someone really leaning into it, right? I have this problem right now, whether it's a math problem in your classroom or a problem in real life, or a problem like I'm sure some of your students have, just like me. Your kid says, can you help me with my homework? That's a problem. Okay, how am I going to lean into this? Am I going to lean into it, or am I going to run from it? How can I use tech tools to help me understand this situation? Another question you could think about is, what are some structures, that your students could think about, what are some structures that I already know and understand that will help me to make sense of this tech tool or problem? So you have a new tech tool, right? Maybe your job rolled out a new reporting system or whatever. You have a new tech tool. What are some structures that you already know that you could make sense of to figure it out? Right? There's a lot of structures that we as human beings, because we've been exposed to technology, know and have access to, but we just don't necessarily realize that that's what that is.
Maybe before call a friend, use some of the other structures or a coworker.
That is very true. I have a coworker, because at the Literacy Assistance Center, each one of us has an area of expertise. I'm the subject matter expert in math, and my counterpart, who is our technology and digital instruction subject matter expert, she was the tech person that I'd always go to, right? I couldn't figure something out, and I just run to her office and I'd say, Nell, how do you da 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 da? Her name is Nell. And she said the same thing to me every time for like a good 2 years. and it was sarcasm because I operate in language of sarcasm. That's my favorite second language, sarcasm. She would say, they make this thing. It's in the shape of that. And on it, there's like a thing called Google. And I was like, "Ah!" Right. But eventually she did help me. And like now that became something that I just do now. I'm like, I can't figure this out. I immediately go to Google to try to get an answer. Whereas before, my first answer would always be to run to someone, right? But I'm like, no, I have better problem solving skills. And now I lean into it. I'm like, oh, challenge accepted. I'm about to figure this out. Right? Like that is a habit of mine. All right. Last, is there another way I can look at this problem or a different approach to using this tech tool? So again, each time I'm giving you like an example with the technology or with a math problem. Is there another way I could look at this problem? That math problem that I was trying to help my daughter with, I totally had to look at it a different way. Because modeling it with just the parabola was not getting it done for me. So then I was like, okay, hold on. Let's write the function. Let's change the way that the function is written. I prefer standard form. She likes vertex form, whatever, right? Like, okay, is there another way I could look at this problem? So these are 3 questions that you can give your learners to encourage them to lean into opportunities. So that's our second strategy. Encourage your learners to lean into the opportunities in their lives. And I would say the same thing for you. If after you leave here, you feel inspired and maybe you want to make that part of your 2025 New Year's resolutions to build and strengthen your own digital resiliency, these questions are for you too. The strategies for you too. Where in my real life, in my everyday life, can I lean into those opportunities to build my skills? I have fixed so many things via YouTube. I feel you. I'm a big fan of YouTube University, right? Like, and now it's not even YouTube University, it's TikTok University because YouTube is long form video and everybody's attention span is no longer than 90 seconds anymore. So now I need a TikTok to teach me how to do the thing. I've learned a lot of Excel skills in the last year via TikTok. Things that I could not do on Excel. I just watched TikToks about it. And now I'm like an Excel, not aficionado, but I'm better than I was before. So you're right about that. I have friends who work in IT and they tell me 90% of their job is being able to Google a solution. You are correct, Jeremy. I am married to someone who works in IT and he says most of his job is problem solving. My husband works in IT, which is why at the beginning I said I was annoyed that my daughter did not ask her dad to help her with the math problem. I'm like, your dad is a really smart human being too. Go ask him. But her answer every time is, yeah, but he does computer stuff, not math stuff. Anyway, next strategy. Okay? So here's our third and final strategy, and I'm going to give you a moment to process it too. And we're going to reflect. This one's really important. In fact, this is the most important one. Have experiences that build confidence. There's that word again. Knowledge and skills with proper support to recover. It's so important to recover from failed experiences and or attempts. I'm pausing because I want to give you time to take that in. 77 minutes ago, when we first started, we did the 4-corner activity, and I asked you to talk to me about how you feel about math, how you feel about technology. And some of the answers and responses that were shared were about failed experiences. The same way that some of us as educators know how important it is to recover from those mathematically, can I please just bring out to your attention how important it is to do that with technology? A lot of us really walk around feeling like we're going to break the internet if we try something and it doesn't work, or we're scared to click that button because we are afraid that I might delete everything and get fired, right? Like whatever that failed experience it is, right? Stephanie, people are scared to do the hard things. Whatever that failed experience is, we've all had it. We all will have it. We will have more as long as we are alive. But what matters is how we recover from it. It's not broken until it's smoking.
That's what I tell the staff.
Not broken until it's smoking, okay? Right? How do we recover from it? So we as teachers, we as educators who are supporting our learners and even ourselves and maybe our loved ones around us, it's important for us to put the proper support in there. And I actually cited this resource for you. There actually is work being done around digital resiliency. It's important to give the support to recover from those failed experiences. So the same way as a math teacher that I actually lean into mistakes, like in fact, one of my favorite instructional routines as a math teacher is called My Favorite Mistake. I purposely seek out wrong answers from my students. I'm like, what's the worst wrong answer you could give for this question and why? Because first of all, that takes a lot of cognitive ability to think about what's the worst wrong answer, because you're actually thinking about the right answer to try to run from it to get the wrong answer. Okay, but now we're leaning into it. So you got a wrong answer. What do we do about that? What can I learn from this? What structure can I find? What problem-solving skills can I build? So as the teacher, I'm going to put those supports there to help them recover from those failed experiences around math. But I also need to be more intentional about that with the technology. Jeremy just dropped in chat box. The best math teachers are the ones who helped me understand why I was wrong instead of just marking the answer incorrect and leaving it at that.
You know, last year, 7th grade math literally broke my husband. He refuses to help with anything with math anymore. And the man is so smart when it comes to math, but all his math is applied. And 7th grade math is a joke. So, you know, kids meet me at the door crying. My husband's back behind him practically crying. And if you've ever met my husband, he don't cry. And so I think that, Jeremy, what you're saying about it being important is like, not only were we breaking children, but we're breaking their parents in math still to this day.
And some of those parents are in your classrooms, right? Some of those parents are in your classroom, and they need to recover in your room. They need to recover in your room. I take this one very seriously, especially around math, right? Like I still, as I said, I started tutoring again because I missed teaching. So my full-time job is doing this, working with teachers, but I missed teaching so much that I started tutoring in the afternoon. And so many of my sessions with those 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th graders are me trying to help them recover from the math experience that they just had in class that day. My teacher, okay, yes, I understand. Okay, so now what? What can we do? How can I support you? Right? So putting in the proper support, but also helping them to understand that those experiences and our attempts are what's going to help build that confidence, knowledge, and skills. So every time, like, you got it wrong, how are you going to leverage that to get it right next time? I broke my spreadsheet. Okay. As far as I'm concerned, Cynthia Bell's motto is, I'm like, I only need to learn that lesson once. Like, I bet you I won't break this spreadsheet again, right? But now I've learned to always copy the spreadsheet first before I start doing the stupidness, right? That way, like, again, I learned a lesson, right? And some of you are smiling because you're probably like, that happened to me last week. We need a math teacher revolution, make better teachers so we won't need therapy for math anxiety. I completely agree, Kate. That's one of the reasons I left the classroom. I left the classroom because I was just like, we need better math teachers. So I do like what I do in working with teachers, but I did miss working with students as well. How hard can teaching people be? That's sarcasm. Thank you for speaking my second language there. All right, so let's make some connections for digital resiliency. We're going back to the Mentimeter. Going to give you one more chance to process. Here's that QR code if you want to scan it. But maybe at this point, you've already noticed the structure and you didn't close it out because you just knew Cynthia was going to go back there. Good for you. Problem solving is important. All right, here's our last question. Which, if any, of the digital resiliency components were applied during the anecdote? So I just want to make sure you remember the digital resiliency components. Problem solving, adaptability, critical thinking, communication and sharing information, and productive struggle. I have a feeling one of these is going to be really high. So in our story, in our anecdote, oh wow, look, they're all, you guys are saying all of them. Okay. There we go. That's the one that I figured would start to run away with the race here. Productive struggle, but also critical thinking. There was a lot of critical thinking happening until my brain just shut down. It was like, nope, we're done with thinking for the day, Cynthia. Go to bed. Communication and sharing information. There was definitely that happening because while I was trying to explain the concept of the vertex with her, she just kept looking at me like, what are you talking about? And I didn't understand why she didn't know until the next day because Mr. Walensky hadn't taught it yet. Like, I'm just like, why don't you know what I'm saying? I'm talking about a vertex. It's the thing at the top. It's the height. I had to give her all these scenarios, hence communication and sharing information. Problem solving, adaptability, critical thinking, productive struggle. You all are right. Hopefully everybody's got the moral of the story, right? These things are all the same. And they're always there. We just got to find those opportunities. We got to be intentional about leaning into them. And we got to be intentional about providing support and access for our learners to lean into them. And if you do that, you have mastered building digital resiliency and numeracy at the same time. And then next year you can teach this workshop, right? Like you're like, this is how awesome I have become at this. So thank you all for reflecting that with me. Here are our final thoughts, but we have 5 minutes left. So I want to stop here to see if anybody has any questions, any how would you do, why would you do's, or any of those things, because we have about 5 minutes left, but I already gave you all the handout. So all of these are hyperlinks. That draw project that I mentioned, the Digital Resiliency in American Workforce, you can access that. This is a link to the National Coalition for Literacy. I wrote an article on this specific topic about teaching numeracy and digital resiliency at the same time and why it matters and is important. So if you want to read that, you can click that. And I won't waste any of your other time telling you what these are. Go click on those buttons and get the resources and explore and learn. Any questions? Because I wanted to make sure that you all had time. Or any final thoughts? Maybe you're like, I can't put together an interrogative sentence, Cynthia, but I can say a statement.
So just a quick reminder, the Desmos calculator is now the TABE calculator. So you're going to have students interacting with that one.
Good point. Thank you. I actually really heavily advocate for teachers to use Desmos, not just because it's a tech tool. Let me be clear. I am not a fan of using technology for technology's sake, right? But I am aware that the GED is on a computer, right? Students need to be able to drag and drop and graph and move things around. So I'm like, if you need students to build that skill, why don't you use the tools for them to learn the skills while they're learning the math? So Desmos is one of my favorite tech tools that I encourage my math teachers to use. Jeremy, I saw you unmute yourself. Go ahead.
Well, this is minor, but it's something that's been rolling in my mind since you mentioned TikTok, and I think about on TikTok, there's that thing called insights and how much math is actually in there. There's statistics, there's time, there's percentages, there's decimals and stuff. And I might not use TikTok with a class per se, but I would use it probably if I were helping, let's say, my niece or nephew understand a math lesson and it applied to what they were learning. It's just amazing how much math is in everyday life that we just subconsciously use, because we're used to it and we don't think of it as math all the time.
There it is, which is why I kept pointing that out several times in the session. Math is more than just numbers. If you are problem solving and figuring things out, you're doing math. In fact, it's my practice and my kids hate it when I do that, when I'm constantly pointing out math, like in our just regular conversations. I'm like, that's math. They're like, okay, mom, like, but it is, right? Like, that's math, right? Like, that's the answer to the question. I think, Kate, you said at the beginning, the whole like, when am I ever going to use this? I am constantly pointing out when math is happening so that that question stops getting asked. You're going to use it every single day, all the time, because it's the habits of mind. That's what mathematicians do. They think. Any other comments, questions? Okay, so I'll give you this one last little nugget because someone gave us a good quote. And I meant to sneak it in earlier. When I was in the classroom, my favorite quote that I gave to my students is, as your algebra teacher, because I taught algebra, as your algebra teacher, my job is not to teach you algebra. My job is to teach you how to think. And algebra is the tool that I will use. Right? So ESL, my job is to teach you how to be successful and be able to navigate your everyday life. GED, my job is to teach you how to think so that you can achieve the goals that you have. And this critical thinking, this literacy text, this math problem is the tool that I'm going to use just to help shift their thinking, because I don't care about the answer to this problem. You don't care about the answer to this problem. I don't care about the answer to this problem. Let's get that out of the way. What I do care about is teaching you how to think so that you will be successful and achieve the goals that you need, because the people who are successful are the ones who are problem solvers and can think and figure things out. And then afterwards, if they have a headache, I say, you're welcome. Okay, so to that end, for all of you, it is 1:30. You're welcome. I hope I gave you something to think about as you go through the rest of your day, the rest of your conference. No problem, Renee. I'm done. It's 1:30.
Thank you, Cynthia, for your time today. Go have lunch. We can all go have lunch now. We'll see everyone later.
All
Thank
right.
you.
Enjoy the rest of your conference. Bye.
Bye.